Does this glorious land of 10,000-year-old civilization, the Saraswati Valley civilization, the Indus Valley civilization, the Harappa, the Mohenjo-daro, the Shaks, the Hun, the Kushans, the Guptas, the Ramayana, the Bhagavan Buddha, the Mahavira, Adi Shankara, that history is reduced to the history of invaders, which should have been a footnote. Even to us who are so proud heirs of the Rajasthan history, there is so much which has been hidden from us deliberately, and a lot of trash has been shoved down our throat in the name of history. So firstly, a Bhil king, you have to understand the Bhils were that empowered that they were having a king who was so powerful that he protected Bappa. He protected a Rajput. How our Rajputs have been belittled.
Exactly.
They have been shamed.
No.
They have been needlessly vilified.
Yes, exactly.
Whereas they gave generations. They gave their lives, not only Rajputs, Jats, Yadavs, Gurjars, the whole martial community, the whole group, they have been vilified that they surrendered to Muslims, they were defeated by Muslims. And this is by a deliberate plan which I call as the Hindu immunodeficiency virus. If, as these great historians of this country claim Haldighati to be Akbar's victory, why did Akbar invade the same area in November 1576? In 47, do you know how many Sardar girls were beheaded by their parents and or the dead body thrown in the wells to escape being taken by Muslims? Will you mock that?
Namaste. We have been fed with a lot of misinformation about our history, our own history. As we know, one of the myths is like the Mughals ruled us for hundreds of years, and it was a huge empire. And any Hindu resistance is a mere footnote. But how many of us know that the Sisodias of Mewar resisted the Mughals for 1,000 years? This is just some of the facts which has been demolished by Dr. Omendra Ratnu in his book, The Maharanas, which we'll be talking about today. And fortunately, we are very fortunate to have Dr. Omendra Ratnu with us today. Thank you, Ratnu, for taking time and joining us. Dr. Ratnu is an ENT surgeon by profession in Jaipur. He also runs an NGO called as Nimit Ekam, which focuses on rehabilitation of Pakistani Hindus. He's also a public speaker, singer, composer, writer, and a Gita communicator. So he wears a lot of hats, and we are lucky to have you. And we'll start off with the book.
Yeah.
So as I was saying, the lot of myths we have, and as I went through the book, the kind of myths you have demolished. But what exactly inspired you to research and write about this book, or about, if I can say specifically, the Sisodias of Mewar? So what really inspired you?
Yeah, in Rajasthan, we have always been in utter reverence of the Sisodias of Mewar, because every child, we grew up with those stories. We know that what they did to fight the Muslim invaders, how Pratap fought Akbar when the Mewar was even at the weakest point in its history. But even to us who are so proud heirs of the Rajasthan history, there is so much which has been hidden from us deliberately, and a lot of trash has been shoved down our throat in the name of history, which as a layman, as a scientist, I knew, but never had the time or inclination or even the expertise to counter it methodically, unless 3 years ago I came across a tweet by Shri Sanjay Dikshit ji, where he said that the real battle of Maharana Pratap was Battle of Diver and not Haldighati. And I said, Diver? I've never heard of Diver. So I went to Diver and I saw the physical evidences. the places where the war was fought, the hoof marks, the pathways where ancient Mewar army used to tread, the bawdis or the wells, the step wells which used to nourish the man and the beast, the Jauhar Sthal, where which is the very revered spots for the local population, and of course written reference in James Todd and Shamal Das ji and a lot of local literature. So, in the course of discovering Diver, I discovered the story of the Mewar dynasty starting in the 8th century from Bappa Rawal and up till Maharana Raj Singh ji, who defeated Aurangzeb conclusively in 1680. Now, except for Pratap and perhaps Maharana Sanga, we don't even know the names. So,
And very recently, if I remember, including myself, name of Bappa Rawal. I mean the media, our textbooks, and even the movies has spread. I mean that kind of myths which you have said, and thankfully to your work, these things are coming out. Or else
yes,
this
my work is
nexus.
still very preliminary, I would say, because there has been a complete washout of the history from 8th century to Prithviraj Chauhan, 12th century, being defeated by Muhammad Ghori. These 500 years of Arab defeat, Arab Islam was conclusively defeated in Bharatvarsha. They have erased that history. So obviously, to erase that history, they had to erase the names. They had to erase the kings who fought. As long as the kings were alive, what was their greatness if they did not fight off the invaders coming from the west? So the scale of it, 500 years is a very long period, sir. It's a very long period in the history of any nation. So erasure of that compounded with other, so then I became a skeptic that not only this, a lot of things have been fed to us which are incorrect, and then gradually the evidence started building up. For example, Delhi Sultanate. In this book, I questioned the premise of Delhi Sultanate. I said, how do you call it a Sultanate when there is no trade routes, there is no economic progress, there are no buildings, there is no art and literature? What is the premise of this Delhi? Does rape and plunder of ordinary Hindus qualify as a Sultanate? This is a very, very primitive and a very biased and a very crooked way of looking at things. Forget historiography. That what was the geographical extent of this Sultanate? What did these sultans do? Were they invincible? When 5 of these so-called sultans were arrested by Mewar Maharanas, of course they were arrested after being defeated and kept in the Chittor fort as prisoners. What Sultanate are we talking about? And the kings who defeated these sultans don't find a mention. So what dynasties are we talking about? Does this glorious land of 10,000-year-old civilization, the Saraswati Valley civilization, the Indus Valley civilization, the Harappa, the Mohenjo-daro, the Shaks, the Hun, the Kushans, the Guptas, the Ramayana, the Bhagavan Buddha, the Mahavira, Adi Shankara, that history is reduced to the history of invaders, which should have been a footnote.
Exactly. I mean, that's the reason.
Why were the invaders of this country called as the benevolent rulers of this country, as if they had come here to civilize us, whereas what they did in all these 1400 years of conflict with Islam is rape, plunder, destroy. For example, Bakhtiyar Khilji destroyed Nalanda University, which is the biggest center of learning. I mean, someday somebody has to call the bluff. That how can you call the plunder of civilization as some kind of a benevolent act? So that and many other lies came to fore when I wrote this book.
Even-
So I can go on and on.
Yeah, I know. And the premise itself is so strong. I mean, as you rightly say, this is a book which has to be in every Hindu household.
Yes.
Uh, but since we're talking about the myths, the other thing which I came across the book is, we have an image that Rajputs. I'm saying other than Rajasthan, their area, the myth is like the image we have is Rajputs were only, fighters or warriors. But what I understood from your book is like the kind of social engineering they did, which is not even a footnote in the history. It's like we have pages and pages of Mughal history, how their administration was, what they did, and all that. But you have shown how the Rajputs fought along with the what we call as tribes and janjatis today.
Oh yes, that is
So can you please
very strong
throw some light on that?
That's a very strong subtext of my story. I'm so glad you have asked me. The Bhils, the tribals
Bhils.
of Rajasthan, and the story starts from Bapa Rawal himself. When he was a kid and he was a fatherless child, and his mother Kamlavati from Avanti, they came to Mewar and was saved by Raja Mandalik, who was a Bhil. So, firstly, a Bhil king. You have to understand the Bhils were that empowered that they were having a king who was so powerful that he protected Bappa Rawal. He protected a Rajput.
This single fact demolishes so many myths.
Right, right. In Rajasthan, we have the Meena community. The Meenas, they are scheduled tribes. They were kings of Savai Madhopur before the Rajputs took over it. Even Jaipur, we have a Jhota Meena, who was a king of the area which we today known as Jhotwada, and it's very close to my place. So these are some people tell me, I'm not very sure about this. Maharashtra is named after Mahars. So Baba Sahib Ambedkar was a Mahar. So after our scheduled caste, we have a state, Maharashtra, where Mahars used to live. So these are the facts which should be brought in front of the society, and the cleavages in our society which the Abrahamics and the leftists and the Breaking India forces are so laboriously building upon. We can very easily demolish them if we tell them that historically Hindu Samaj has been one. In fighting Islamic invasions, in fighting the Britishers, the Hindu Samaj was always one. It is only in the last 70 years that these schisms and these fault lines have been amplified to such an extent, complemented by the inadequate Hindu leadership and the pathetic Hindu intelligentsia, the hopeless Buddhijeevi of Hindus who was in bed with these Islamists and the leftists, that our society has completely been pulverized by these narratives, and we are where we are. Every section of the society is standing against the other section, and that needs to be gradually rebuilt by telling the true story. That is why in my story I've dedicated this book to the Bhils of Mewar, because without the Bhils of Mewar, the Maharanas would have been nothing, because the critical mass of the army, when the Mewar kingdom used to follow the scorched earth policy, that when the Muslims would invade, they would shift the populations from plains to the mountains. They were fed by the Bhils. So how can you have how can you have a narrative without the Bhil component of it? Which crooked evil mind would take out the Bhils out of this beautiful equation? And to the credit of the Mewar royal dynasty, the Mewar royal house, today the emblem, the insignia of Mewar has Bhils on one side and Rajputs on the other sides. That was the level of social cohesion.
Then what are we talking about when we have a image that the Rajputs were high and they were
I have written this in the last chapter of my book, is The Silence of the Lions.
Yeah, right.
And I've said that how our Rajputs have been belittled.
Exactly.
They've been shamed.
No.
They've been needlessly
Yes.
vilified.
Yes, exactly.
Whereas they gave generations. They gave their
Sacrificed.
lives, Baba. They gave their women to fire.
I'll come.
Unimaginable sacrifices of Rajputs, and they are being maligned. The reason is Rajputs, and not only Rajputs, Jats, Yadavs, Gurjars, the whole martial community, the whole group, they have been vilified that they surrendered to Muslims, they were defeated by Muslims. And this is by a deliberate plan which I call as the Hindu immunodeficiency virus, like HIV, the human deficiency. That the Hindu immunodeficiency virus depletes the Hindu warriors, it maligns them, it confuses them, it shames them needlessly, so that the Hindu society ultimately becomes defenseless. And infections of Abrahamics can destroy us.
Thanks
That's the
to,
metaphor.
Thanks to, Bollywood kind of movies they are generating, the kind of myths they have spread.
They should be tried.
Right.
They should be tried.
You spoke about Jauhar. I'll come to that specifically later. But before this, just one fact which was nagging in my mind when I read the book: the Battle of Haldighati, and we have been fed Ashoka the Great. Akbar the Great. Akbar the Great. But even in Wikipedia, the generic information is that Maharana Pratap was defeated. But you break the myth and you call it as the first victory of Haldighati.
Yeah.
So, why do you call that, and what are your sources for that? Specifically, but
Logic.
Haldighati.
Of course, I have sources, but first is logic.
Yes.
How do you decide the outcomes of a battle or a war? By the objectives?
Yes.
What was the objective of Akbar?
He wanted
Defeat?
to defeat
Or
Maharana.
kill
Pratap.
Did he, or arrest? What did he achieve?
Nothing.
Nothing.
He didn't.
Pratap's objective, on the other hand, was to send a message to surrounding Hindu kingdoms that I'm going to take on the strongest kingdom at that time in alliance with Rajputs of Jaipur. I'm going to take on them. You better align with me. Most of them, Banswara, Dungarpur, Eider, even Bundi, they aligned with Pratap after the Haldighati battle. Because they knew this man is no nonsense guy. He's going to take it to the logical end. So Pratap achieved his objective. He sent a message directly to Akbar also that I'm not going to surrender. Pratap not only sent this message to Akbar, but also sent it to fellow Rajputs that we can fight this man. Right? Second, June 1576, Battle of Haldighati is fought.
Right.
If, as these great historians of this country claim Haldighati to be Akbar's victory, why did Akbar invade the same area in November 1576? Pratap was already defeated.
Yes.
What was Akbar doing in November 1576?
If he had defeated them soundly then.
Number three, Dr. Chandrasekhar Sharma of Udaipur has done some brilliant research, and he discovered 3 Tamrapatras of his Pratap's era, signed by his minister Bhamashah. 3 villages, Mohi and 2 other villages, I'm forgetting the name, Pratap gave as Jagirs. Now, which defeated king gives Jagirs to his vassals? And these are dated in August and September 1576. These are official revenue records. This is not a historian building a cockable story. Either right-wing historian or a left-wing historian. I'm not saying that. Not historians. This is the revenue record saying that. Will you take it into cognizance or not? And the last thing, the destruction of the Mughal army post Haldighati battle. Once Pratap had retreated into the hills, then Man Singh ji and Asif Khan, the Mughal general, chased him, and Pratap was waiting at Gogunda, and he had already vacated Gogunda, and the moment his Mughal army entered Gogunda, it was sealed from all sides. For 3 months, the Mughal army survived on horse meat, and more soldiers of Mughals died than in the battle of Haldighati. And the Mughal historian Abul al-Badayuni, he was there. He himself quotes that the number of deaths in the battle were 2:1 in favor of Mewar. For two Mughal army men dying, one Mewar army man died. It's not. This is al-Badayuni saying.
Sources, yes.
So then.
I mean, there are so many instances in the book about the
Khanwa. Similarly, Khanwa was
exactly.
We labeled as a defeat for Sangha, and Khanwa was far bigger and a far more important battle than Haldighati, 1527. And I have proved it in the book that the victory of Babur is a lie. It was won by Sangha.
Yes. Exactly.
Although Sangha was cheated and poisoned by Babur in one of his meetings, probably the third meeting.
Okay.
But that's another story that they are all known to do this kind of acts.
I mean, there are so many myths you have literally broken, especially about this battle strategies and all that.
Yeah.
But the other myths which you already touched upon, the first is the status of women under the Rajputs, and second is the lack of unity, so-called lack of unity among the Rajputs. So the first thing is, did the Rajput kings force their women into fire or Jauhar? What do you say? That is the first myth, and that is also my question. Second thing is, were the Rajput kings were really not so united at all? You talked about it, but I just want you to clarify with, since you have given sources. Were they so disunited? The myth is that the Mughals grew stronger because the Rajputs were not united. So these two things, your take on.
Tell me one thing. According to the official historical sources, the number of women who committed Jauhar on the first Sakat Jauhar of Chittor, 1303 August, is approximately 20,000. Can you force 20,000 women to fire, to immolate, tying their children to them?
No.
Suppose we reduce this number to 2,000. Can you force 2,000 women to force them to be burnt alive? A couple of them will escape, right?
Yeah.
Somebody might get a horse and she will escape on that.
True. Very true.
This is the most hideous allegation on poor Rajputs, that they forced their women to do Jauhar. The truth is, Islamists are known to make love and sex to dead bodies.
Yes.
Which is known as necrophilia.
Necrophilia.
As recently as 2012, there was a law passed in Egyptian parliament that a man is allowed farewell sex with his wife for 7 days after the death of his wife. Welcome to the civilization. Our foremothers knew this.
Yes.
They chose such a gruesome death. The question that is legitimate, that can be legitimately asked is, why didn't they stab themselves or they poison themselves? Why didn't they choose an easier way to die?
Right. Right.
Because there was no other way to ensure that Muslims will not even get their dead bodies. Imagine the consequences of a princess, of a queen, of a high-level lady, of Samant's wife, being raped, her dead body being raped by Muslims in the streets of Mewar. How demoralizing would it be?
And you have written quoted sources how women were being sold as sex slaves in the Arabian market. You have quoted that. Yes, it's there.
It is in their theology. It's not about my quoting. They quote it.
Then they do it as part of their...
That's part of their dictum. So don't blame Omendra Ratnu for that. So our forefathers chose not to be sex slaves. So that if defeat is imminent, then in front of their husbands, in front of their fathers, in 47, do you know how many Sardar girls were beheaded by their parents and the dead body thrown in the wells to escape being taken by Muslims? Will you mock that? That Sardars did it to their daughters? Did Sardars do it to their daughters? Or Islamic zealots did it to the Hindu and Sikh girls? We don't even have the moral courage to speak the truth now. And we are blaming the victim. as the oppressor, and the oppressor is walking scot-free. He is the civilizer here. He is the benevolent giver, provider.
The great.
Bloody, this is not the way the internet has exposed these lies. We're going to expose them.
Yes. I mean, you can't imagine the kind of sacrifice. I could call it a sacrifice.
It's more than sacrifice. It is something. As I made a video on this, and I said, this is a superior level of consciousness. This is not an ordinary level of consciousness on which you and I dwell. To say that we will dissolve our body in fire as an act of defiance against Islamic invaders, such that they will not even get our dead bodies to have sex with. It requires next level of awareness.
These are not something which is palatable for the modern feminists.
Exactly.
Or the so-called liberals. And the second thing is, I was saying the Rajput unity.
And that's all utter nonsense.
You have broken the
Battle of
myths.
Rajasthan, in which Bapa Rawal defeated Junaid al-Mari of Umayyad dynasty, something around 725 or 726 AD. Nag Bhatt of Malwa, Jai Bhatt of Gujarat, Pulkesi Raja of Dakshin Bharat, South India, and Bapa Rawal. They united Hindu forces, defeated them. Kuman too is supposed to have fought Al-Mamu, an Arab invader, by an army of such proportions that James Todd writes the names of the dynasties who sent their warriors. It runs in 2 pages.
Right.
That many people were, something said, at that time 3 lakh warriors assembled to fight Al-Mamu. This is like within 4 generations of Bapa Rawal. Then Jaitra Singh ji, Rawal Jaitra Singh defeated Iltutmish by aligning with Gujarat's king. Then Sangha. Sangha, Rajput Confederation, Jaipur's Prithviraj Kachawa, Jodhpur's Rao Ganga, Chanderi, Rai Sen, Dungarpur, Banswada, Eider, Bundi, Kota, every Rajput king was with him.
No, as you say this, the things that come to my mind is, it's these myths are spread to say that we are a defeated civilization.
Yes.
The reasons because we are not united, but which is not true. And the another myth is which I want you to shed light on.
No, but I deny the first premise that we are a defeated civilization.
Yeah,
we are not a defeated civilization. We are 100 crores today.
Yes,
Wherever Islam went, it defeated them within a matter of decades.
And
after 1400 years, if you are 100 crores, how are you a defeated civilization? Please educate me.
Exactly. Very true.
So the premise itself is wrong. That first they fed this lie, then they give us the rationale to this lie. I'm saying this lie itself is to be questioned.
The Mughals gave us so many dishes. They civilized us.
Did they?
No, people like Javed Akhtar trying to.
Javed Akhtar is a
I'm just taking a bad example, but so,
kind of a semi-romantic, delusional personality. He thinks himself to be oversmart and very poetic, but it was very mediocre poetry. But anybody who justifies Akbar, at least he's ignorant if he's not evil. Because Mr. Akbar, I don't like calling him Akbar. I learned this from a friend, P. Guru's Shri Iyer, that let's call him Jalaluddin. That was his name. Akbar means great. So there was nothing great about this man. So Jalaluddin, on 25th February 1568, slaughtered 40,000 Hindus in one day. And this is not a right-wing historian saying this. This is Al-Badayuni, Abul Fazl and Nizamuddin Bakshi, Islamic historians quoting that he did that. By what standards should Hindus teach such a murderer to their children as great? What act of greatness?
Sadly, I was just referring to NCERT textbooks. It's the same still. Akbar the Great.
That's the sad story. Even after
and it's the same thing we have with Bollywood
in the center and at states, we are not doing much about curriculum. I hope There are some very good signals coming out of Karnataka government, so hope they can change the curriculum and include a chapter on Maharanas. I mean, look at the struggles of Maharana Hamir Singh, how he brought back the entire dynasty from the brink of extinction.
Exactly.
It's a sublime story.
I mean, it's a lesson for the entire civilization, Hindu civilization.
Absolutely.
I mean, you rightly said we are not a different civilization, but given the kind of challenges we are facing, we might face. Those are the lessons.
Those are the lessons because they faced it even under worse circumstances. They were outwitted, they were outnumbered, they were outmaneuvered. There was no communication. No? Today we have communication. Communication is everything. They couldn't seek help from from their own friends and brothers. Before their letter would reach there, it would take 15 days. And these barbarians moved in hordes. So they were like locusts. They would eat up a paddy field and then they would move on to next. So before the farmer would get any chance to respond, his entire crop is gone. So that's how they dealt in Bharatvarsha. So in 1400 years, what percentage of population could they Islamize?
Exactly. I mean, a subtext to your book should be a myth breaker. Maharana's myth breaker. This one, I mean, you've talked about the Rajput unity and all these so-called myths. We have covered the status of women and all this. This one thing which I want you to talk about is the life of a common man. How did he see his king, and what is the kind of sacrifices a common Rajput or a common man did under these great kings?
Wonderful question. I must compliment you on this. That I've again dedicated this book to simple people of Mewar. I've said without the people of Mewar, without the Bhils, without the ordinary Rajputs. I mean, every Rajput was not a king. Every Rajput was not a noble.
Yes.
But these were lakhs of Rajputs who were dying. Unknown names. Nameless. We don't know anybody's name even. Right? Barely 10, 12 we know the names.
Yes.
But they died for the glory, for the honor, for the loyalty, the fidelity to Dharma. So, ordinary people were the backbone of the Maharana's opposition to Islam.
Yes.
The economics, the trade routes,
Right.
the critical mass, they sent their sons to die, boss.
So
They sent their sons to fight for Mewar
So you're
for
indirectly saying
1000 continuous years.
even the common man, forget their king. The common man was aware of jihad.
Common
The
man was
Islamic-
aware of jihad.
Islamic invasion.
And more importantly, common man was idealizing his Maharana, who had raised the banner. So he was inspired by these Maharanas that if Pratap is living life of such deprivation, he's sleeping on leaves, he's not eating in metal utensils, he's given up sleeping on velvet. So how can I, an ordinary Mewadi would ask, I will suffer like my king? That oneness, see, that oneness of the so-called feudal society of Rajasthan was achieved by these Mewar Maharanas. And one very beautiful thing I will share before I conclude this. Before Maharana Hamir Singh, they were referred to as Rawal.
Okay.
So Rawal, if you expand the word, is Rajyatva, Varatva and Lakshmiyatva. This was the name given by the Bhils to these kings. Rajyatva, Varatva and Lakshmiyatva. It was a grandfather or 2-3 generations ahead of Hamir Singh who said that we have become too arrogant.
Oh.
Now we will be called as Ranas. We will be called as Maharanas. And what does it mean? That we are the caretakers of this kingdom. This kingdom belongs to Shiva. Ekling ji. हम उनके दीवान हैं. We are the Diwans. That was significant leap when Europe and these thugs and these crusaders and these jihadis were in dark ages. This was the level of human spirituality that these kings said, we're going to remove the title of Rawal and we will be known as Maharanas. And we will be the mere caretakers. The moment you become a caretaker, You are first among the equals. So that oneness was achieved with the people of Mewar, and the people of Mewar responded with equal fidelity and equal loyalty.
And I don't think there's any other civilization examples anywhere in human history where, especially after the advent of Islam,
Yeah.
where somebody has resisted for 1,000 years.
There is not a single example where people have done Saka Jauhars. Islam went to Egypt, Islam went to Persia, Islam went to Mesopotamia, it went to Spain, it went to
years,
Afghanistan,
decades.
Kazakhstan. Any society would have thought of it, no? It was only the Hindus, the Rajputs of Rajasthan, who came up with this, that we are going to burn ourselves alive. Because that's such a strong message to the people of Mewar. There are queens. They've burned themselves alive. They've paid the ultimate price. So why should we surrender?
Unity, valor, the societal values, social integration. I mean, these are the things which should be highlighted about the Rajputs, along with their valor. Obviously, we know about the battles. Even you have broken the myths about the results of battles. There's so many things. But in conclusion, finally, this is one thing what is that we learn from the Maharanas today, given the kind of the jihad is not ending anytime soon, and we'll be faced with 10 times the kind of ISIS. Will be more.
Evilness,
There'll be more
so
Al Qaeda's, more Islamic. Exactly, invasions. So, what are the if you can summarize 2 or 3 things we can learn from the Maharanas, according to your research, which will help the Hindu civilization?
Today's Hindu civilization to fight back? Yeah, that's a good question.
Right.
Number one is the complete distancing from power.
Right.
These were not power maniacs, because had they been power maniacs, the easiest thing for them would have been to compromise. They would have womanized, they would have boozed, they would have sucked the blood of poor people of Mewar, like the rest of the jokers. This is the value system that Islamic invaders brought to this country. Womanize, booze, and suck the blood of your subjects.
Stay in power.
They did not do this. The aloofness to power, power being merely an instrument of change, power being merely an instrument of service, that was ingrained in these Maharanas. And that is something that Hindu Samaj of today has to learn. What Modi ji had once said, that सत्ता के लिए सत्ता का क्या करेंगे? सत्ता से अगर परिवर्तन नहीं ला सकते, ये अलग बात है कि वो खुद भी भूल गए हैं कि सत्ता के आने के बाद में इतिहास का करिकुलम क्यों नहीं चेंज हो रहा है. मैं तो अब मैं लपेट के नहीं बोलता, अब मैं सीधा बोलता हूँ. सिटीजनशिप अमेंडमेंट एक्ट क्यों नहीं पास हो रहा है भाई? सत्ता के लिए सत्ता थोड़ी थी. सत्ता से अगर आप हिंदू समाज का हित नहीं कर रहे हैं, इफ यू आर नॉट यूजिंग पावर फॉर द बेनिफिट ऑफ द हिंदू समाज, व्हाट्स द पॉइंट ऑफ सत्ता? सो दैट इज one thing that Hindu Samaj has to learn. Number 2, the degree of sacrifice, the sheer scale to burn yourself alive, to take on an army which is 4 times your size without thinking of the consequences, and then coming out victorious. So no matter how low the nadir is, no matter how low your morale is, no matter how low your numbers are, you still got to fight. We will not yield. We will not surrender. Imagine Jaipur Rajputs aligning with Mughals. Pratap could have surrendered easily. He said, no, whatever. We will take on you also. Come, bring it on. So the Hindu Samaj should be ready to say, bring it on. You want to behead one Kanhaiya? We will give birth to 100 more Kanhaiyas. 100 more Kanhaiyas will rise. And the Hindu Samaj will rise to protect the family of that poor murdered tailor. Innocently, poor man was doing his job and was beheaded by these thugs.
That's a key lesson.
The third, that's the key lesson, that the Hindu Samaj is not going to give up. We are not going to give up our 10,000-year-old civilization to a bunch of barbarians. We're not going to yield. No matter, and if the Hindu leadership, if our Mathadhishas and Dharmacharyas who have compromised us are not telling the truth, then the middle class Hindus will speak. Then the educated technocrat, doctors, IAS officers like Sanjay Dikshit, Pushpendra Kulshesh, journalists, we will speak the truth. And we have the tool. Mahadev has given us the internet to take the truth to the Hindu Samaj. And a critical mass of Hindu Samaj will be awakened. We will get the requisite funding, and we will take on the twin mafias who want to destroy us, who want to engulf us, who call evil names to our gods, who question our way of life, of 10,000-year-old way of life, which has given such brilliant societies and brilliant history, and they have nothing but dark ages to show to the world, and yet they malign us with the money power that they have at their disposal. Hindu Samaj will resist it.
Thank you, Dr. Ratnu. I mean, the book itself, as I rightly say, this is a book which has to be in every Hindu home. And the reasons, as Dr. Ratnu said, he summarized the lessons we learn from the Maharanas, the lessons for the Hindu society today and in the future. This is a must-have book in every Hindu home. I thank Dr. Omendra Ratnu for taking the time off.
Having me here.
And I thank you for taking the effort you have put in for writing this book.
Thank you.
So can't thank you enough. So thank you again.